Hello, everybody, and welcome. You are listening to the Pure Strategies Conversation webinar series. We are excited to offer these unique discussions to help you transform your business to create a more sustainable future. I'm Cheryl Baldwin, a VP of Sustainability Consulting at Pure Strategies, where our team provides sustainability consulting to companies looking to develop goals, enhance their sustainability program, and implement changes in their products, packaging, and supply chains. We're offering these short webinars to provide insight that will help companies in their work to advance environmental and social performance in their business, helping show you the possibilities for change and empower you with examples and insights from those at the forefront. You can find our past webinars, reports, resources on our website, throughstrategies.com, including information about the work we've done with Seventh Generation, Walmart, Ben & Jerry's, and other sustainability leaders. During this 30-minute webinar, you will hear from Tim Greiner, the Managing Director of Pure Strategies, as well as the co-founder of Pure Strategies and the Chemical Footprint Project. He's been providing custom sustainability solutions to corporate clients for over 20 years. And he will be talking with Dave Rapaport. He is the Global Social Mission Officer for Ben & Jerry's, where he leads the brand's commitment to be a force for good through the day-to-day impacts of their operations and value chain, and using their influence as a business through activism campaigns promoting progressive social change. He has been a mission-driven activist for more than 30 years with Ben & Jerry's, and prior to that, as Vice President for Earth and Community Care at Aveda, with the Governor of Vermont, Seventh Generation, and spending 2 decades in the public policy arena, including the Executive Director of the Vermont Public Interest Research Group and directing Greenpeace's national work on toxic chemicals and pollution prevention. Tim and Dave will discuss what it takes to effectively integrate activism into a company and advance on a brand social mission. We aim to have some time to cover the questions we receive from you, the audience. So please provide your questions in the Q&A field because you will be muted throughout this session. I'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end, and we will be recording the session and we'll post it on the Pure Strategies website. And for now, I'd like to turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's great to see you today, Dave, and to have a chance to connect and have this conversation. So I'm excited for our half an hour together today. And there's so much to talk about, Dave. I mean, there's with regards to what's been happening here in the US with the Black Lives Matter movement and racial justice, as well as so many other social and environmental issues. But where I was hoping to start today was just to back up a little bit, because your title's a little bit unique, because rather than a sustainability title, Ben & Jerry's frames this bucket of issues around something called social mission. So could you talk a little bit about what social mission means to Ben & Jerry's and how you guys manage that?
Sure. Well, first of all, nice to be able to have this conversation with you. You and I have worked together over the years for actually quite a long period of time, and so it's fun to be able to do this. Ben & Jerry's, as many folks know, has long been guided by a 3-part mission. So in addition to the social mission, which I lead, we of course, as all companies do, have an economic mission and a product mission. And I think what's maybe no longer so unique about Ben & Jerry's, but what Ben & Jerry's was sort of a pioneer in was recognizing the way these 3 people, planet, profit kinds of things intertwine. It really is true that the social mission is always considered in what we do, along with our economic imperatives and our product mission. The social mission has its origins in the values of our co-founders. And we now talk about that as being about human rights and dignity, social and economic justice, and environmental protection, restoration, and regeneration. So we have a team of actually about now I think 18 people globally that work on the social mission. And really think about it in two halves. On the one hand, we have advancing those values through the direct impact we have as a business through our operations and value chain. So included in that are the traditional sustainability functions, also an extensive amount of work on what we call values-led sourcing. And then we're also doing a lot of work, have been even prior to recent weeks, advancing racial equity within our business. Although certainly the events of recent weeks have raised the issue to the forefront of everybody's mind and created a new level of urgency and expectations around that. We have people working on each of those areas. And then the other half is how we use our influence as a business within society to advance those values through our activism. It's usually fan-facing activism. We also do work to try to influence the business community. In the United States, that activism has been focused for several years on racial justice. And currently, the focus has been actually criminal justice reform. So we're sort of smack in the middle of the issues that are on everybody's mind right now. In Europe, we're working on refugee and asylum rights in various parts of the world. The primary focus is climate change and LGBTQ issues, marriage equality. We work on all of those issues everywhere, but those areas I outlined are sort of the ongoing focus currently, but we work on other things as issues arise. So that's sort of the general framework for how we approach the social mission.
What's fascinating about that is you have this overarching framework, but it's also somewhat topically specialized by region, it sounds like, and differentiated based upon the markets that you're in and where you're selling product and where you're engaging with either consumers or with government and policymakers. It's fascinating. And I guess maybe if we could, I'd love to drill down into the criminal justice reform. I saw that, after the death of George Floyd, that you guys put out a statement, and it was really probably one of the definitive corporate statements that came out around advocacy and corporate advocacy in this time. And I guess what I'd love to hear about is, like, how did that come about? The decision-making process, what to include or not include, and what's the reaction been to Ben and Jerry's George Floyd statement?
Sure. Well, we have been engaged with a range of NGO partners on these issues for quite a while. Some folks may remember we came out with quite a strong statement in support of Black Lives Matter a number of years ago. All of our work globally is really guided by strategies of our NGO partners. We view our role as really bringing the sort of the tools we have as a business to the table to help them on their campaigns. And so we've been working closely with organizations for a long time that not just inform us but guide us. It was a pretty organic and natural process to develop that statement. We had already advocated for a number of structural reforms, such as reparations and issues related to money bail and many of the criminal justice issues that have been part of the current discussion. We've been talking about structural and institutional racism and the actions that need to be taken to dismantle it for a while. That statement we made was really an effort to stand in solidarity with these movement activists, more so than to be a persuasive piece to our fan base. We feel that's an important role that we have to play, and we think that all businesses have a responsibility to speak out on matters of principle that way, so we are fortunate to have the ability to do that. The reaction was certainly beyond what we could have imagined. It really seemed to be one of those statements, as you alluded to, that captured not only the anguish and the outrage about what happened, but because we laid out a series of sort of 4 points of action that we were calling for, that went beyond the typical sort of statement that people made around their intentions and their internal work. And we're pleased that may have catalyzed, more thinking, across the business world and beyond.
I think some important points there is that Ben & Jerry's has been in this conversation, as you said, with the statement about Black Lives Matter going back to 2016. And the other thing, as you noted, is some very concrete actions that you're asking to be taken, and for both legislatively, policy-wise, including reparations, which certainly is, as you say, standing alongside and supporting the activists, which are really driving that agenda. Many businesses are putting out maybe not similar statements, but statements. But Ben & Jerry seems to have come to this more clearly and earlier than other companies. And one of the things I'm wondering just about is your corporate structure. So one of the things that happened in the acquisition agreement when Unilever bought Ben & Jerry's was the provision for an independent board. And so I'm just wondering, does that independent board, what type of flexibility does that give the business? Is that any different, do you think, from other businesses that are owned by large corporations? Could you talk a little bit about the independent board and how that manifests itself?
Well, the acquisition agreement when Unilever purchased Ben & Jerry's was very unique, and I think still stands as being unique. Part of the acquisition was the creation of this independent board of directors, which actually has responsibility for ensuring brand integrity and the integrity of the social mission. And so Unilever is obligated to grow the impact of the social mission at least as fast as revenues. And the board really sets direction and approves of work within the social mission arena, and beyond to other things that relate to brand integrity. There is one Unilever representative on the board. The rest are independent directors, and they're primarily social activists. And so that clearly is the reason why we've been able to do what we're doing, and it was a way that Ben & Jerry were able to ensure that their values were preserved through the acquisition. And I will say that certainly over time, Unilever has been on its own journey and has evolved, and it is a very collaborative relationship. There's not real conflict. We at times take positions that are directly in opposition to corporate positions, but it's all well understood that we have the independence to do that. But more than anything else, we're working collaboratively together now on most of the things that Ben & Jerry's feels is important.
Could you talk a little bit about the nexus between leadership and stakeholder engagement, and how does stakeholder engagement help you formulate your leadership positions, or is leadership positions, is that kind of brewed internally and then cast back and bounced off of the external stakeholders that you guys engage with?
Well, certainly we learn a lot, and as I mentioned, we really try to support the work of our NGO partners. So there's sort of an ongoing dialogue and process that allows all of that to evolve. But I think one of the things that perhaps distinguishes us is that when we make statements about our values, they are really coming from what we value. We're not doing what is typically done with, say, cost-related marketing, where we're trying to understand what a particular group of stakeholders wants, and then figure out how we can, sort of appeal to them and supporting that. We're deciding what our values are. We're making statements to advance those. And we then connect with people who share those values. We're not out to sort of try to get close to a wide range of people who may be beyond those values or not share them. Ben Cohen observed that the closest relationship you can have with your consumers is over shared values. And so it not only has allowed us to act with what I hope is the integrity that we have, but it has been good for business in that we have very close relationships with our fans.
Right, and I understand that those consumers who understand and know about your values are much more loyal than the consumers who don't, and it's kind of
yeah. Certainly, all of the research that we see, the insights that we gather certainly support the loyalty that our social mission brings. It's not as widely known among our fan base as one might expect, but among those who are aware of it, it really has bred a lot of loyalty.
So the takeaway for me here is figure out your values and what you stand for. Don't go out to a focus group and have them tell you what you should stand for.
Yeah.
It's great, Dave. We've got a few more minutes before we turn to questions. So I thought I'd just drill in on another area, which is setting aggressive targets. Ben & Jerry's recently set a science-based target for carbon to reduce emissions by 40% on an intensity basis by 2025, I believe. Could you talk a little bit about how the company is managing the process of meeting that target, and how it's engaging stakeholders, suppliers, et cetera? I'd be really interested.
Sure. Well, as you know very well, actually, our carbon footprint is primarily in Scope 3. So it's really upstream in our sourcing of ingredients, and our primary ingredient is dairy, and it's no surprise that that's our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, just over 50%. And so a lot of our effort is focused there to reduce emissions from our dairy farms. We also are doing work across a range of other ingredients that make up another 20 to 25% of our overall carbon footprint. And so I think we may be, I don't know if more and more companies are focusing on Scope 3, but we recognized early on that was where we really needed to devote our efforts. So we've had for many years a caring dairy program, which is part of our values-led sourcing work, that has been working with farmers to encourage practices that reduce emissions. And increasingly that program is moving toward one that is shifting from incremental improvements in practices to outcome-based improvements, and increasingly adopting third-party standards, which really allow a clearer sort of level of credibility in what we're doing. And so we're focused there a lot on reducing the emissions from cropping, for better cropping practices for the feed, which is on the order of 20% of the emissions from a dairy farm. So regenerative agriculture has been a big focus, building soil health that not only can reduce the use of synthetic inputs and reduce emissions, but ultimately could turn fields into net carbon sinks. And so that's been a big focus of ours. Alongside that, we have been piloting various technologies that can reduce emissions from manure management, which is actually about 40% of the emissions from a dairy farm. And we're very interested in the developments taking place with dietary additives that can modify the rumen of a cow, which is the source of another 40% of emissions from the burping. And so that's an example, certainly the major area of our work, but we're also looking at projects that can inset carbon in other parts of our sourcing, for example, in communities where we source cocoa in Africa. So that's just, I guess, probably the major areas of focus for us on carbon. And in addition, the other area I'll just add for sustainability is our focus on eliminating petrochemical plastic from our packaging. So we're moving toward making all of our packaging compostable. So those are the two sort of major sustainability areas of focus for us right now.
Thanks, Dave. I feel like we could go on and talk about these projects and others for another hour, but I think what I'd like to do is turn it back to Cheryl at this point to see if there's any questions from those that are watching online. Cheryl?
Yeah, we've gotten some great questions. So we'll get started maybe with something that you left off with, which is about your values, and how do you determine what issues to focus on and determine what the value should be for the organization, since that seems to be a critical driver for Ben & Jerry's. And then related to that, how do you prevent the organization from reacting to anything or everything that pops up?
Yeah, good question. And that can be hard, that last part of it. So, as I mentioned, it really starts with understanding what our values are. But what I didn't talk about was that along with that, what we're really after is systemic change, really going at the root of problems. And so that really takes us away from what is typical of companies, which is sort of charitable work or, sort of cause-related marketing, but actually we're trying to figure out what we can do to help create the greatest long-term change in dealing with things on that sort of systematic level. And so, between, the match of our values and strategies that get at systemic change, that really guides us. And again, in dialogue with our NGO partners, our job, we sell ice cream. We're lucky to have a staff on my team, which is really knowledgeable, many of whom come out of activism. But, our role is to support the work of folks who do that full time. And so, some of it is out of what we worked on historically, for continuity, and some of it is just what is the thing we can do that can have the greatest impact. And it does take a lot of discipline to keep from jumping from thing to thing. But, if you're in the taking on the work of that kind of deep systemic change, it has to be long-term, and you have to have credibility with your partners. And so we tend not to, we're not looking annually to say, what are we going to do this year? We're in these efforts, for a longer haul.
Good, thank you, that helps. And there was a question kind of related to that. How do you measure the impact of your social mission in terms of making sure it grows at the same rate as some of the other parts of your mission or in the direction you're hoping for?
Yeah, so that's just an ongoing experiment. We do, sort of stemming from the acquisition agreement, attempt to measure it. We have a quality of results sort of scorecard that somebody on my team who's been with Ben & Jerry's for many years has been developing and evolving, and so we continue to experiment with various ways to measure the impacts of what we're doing. It obviously gets more difficult when you're, say, engaged with sort of long-term policy change. You can sort of, is it right to measure whether a law passed that we had something maybe hopefully to do with, but only one of many players. We want to go beyond simply measuring things like our social media impact, what our reach is, or number of shares and that kind of thing. But certainly those are elements of it. So we have this scorecard, which has, I can't remember what we're up to now, but it's several dozen indicators that give us at least some idea of whether we're being effective or not. But again, that's a continuous experiment that we continue to try to improve on as we go.
Good, thanks. And I've got a couple questions I'm going to try to combine here. So there's a bit of a follow-up in terms of how in the beginning the values were uncovered and how kind of racial equity rose to the top. And then if you could also describe kind of the intersection of some of those values, maybe climate and racial equality or other things like that.
Sure. Well, as I think we're all now much more aware of than we were 2 or 3 weeks ago, the sort of the stain of racism, which really has been an element of our country since before its founding. Since the first slaves were brought to Jamestown in the early 1600s, has left such a living legacy that goes on and has been perpetuated over time, even after the Civil War, through Black codes and the history of the terrorism of lynching and Jim Crow, and now with mass incarceration. There is no way that we can really advance as a society to solve any of the other problems as long as we are allowing a system of white supremacy to prevail in this country. And so, it really just came out of the values of our co-founders and our board, and has just, we just saw it as a fundamental issue that along with others around justice in society that we needed to support. That we felt responsible to. Clearly, justice is an element of so many issues. We talk about climate change within the company in terms of climate justice. So, as most folks are aware, marginalized communities here and around the world suffer the most from climate change, and there really is a strong element of justice that runs through that as well. So if there is a through line to everything we work on, it really is about justice.
Good, thank you. Now, I think we might have time for one more question, and I'll ask maybe Tim to start. And it's kind of getting to the last part of your discussion on ambitious targets. And I wonder, Tim, if you could start maybe by helping describe like how you know an organization is ready to set ambitious targets and what the first steps are. And then Dave, if you could maybe continue to address some of the other questions we have that talk maybe more about some specific pieces of your climate work, like a price on carbon or other approaches that you guys have used to really advance that ambition. So Tim, do you want to get that started?
Yeah, and it's a great way to frame it. Businesses, I think, are often thinking about what's material to the company, then how to set a target. And I think for so many companies in the past decade, they've set targets on what they thought they could do versus today we have the science to know what's required of nation states, of sectors in the economy, and we've even been able to bring that down to businesses. So I think the realization that there are limits to our planet and limits environmentally to a variety of systems, whether be they land or oceans or climate, means that there's now tools that help companies set those targets. So I think that's the first realization. We need to set a target, not just what we can do, but what science is asking. That gets a company ready. Then it's having a much more detailed understanding of the company's impact that's critical to helping set that target. So with that context, Dave, yeah, please elaborate on the Ben and Jerry's situation.
Sure. Well, it was, really understanding our carbon footprint and where it was that has led to our strategy and the ability to set targets, which, as I mentioned, are focused on scope 3. If you're not ready to begin the process of setting ambitious targets, you probably don't have a license to operate for very long. That doesn't mean you know how to do it, but it means we got to roll up our sleeves and begin to try and figure it out as we go. One of the elements that has helped us is that we have an internal tax on carbon, currently at $10 a ton, that is funding work in this area, but we know that that's probably a low number that has to go up as we proceed in our strategy to be able to really hit these targets. And we know that our targets, because they're intensity based, are not even aggressive enough, as aggressive as they appear to be. So we need to find ways to do it, and that gets also into business strategy. We know, for example, that to meet our targets, we have to have a larger portion of our portfolio in non-dairy, which is going to be inherently lower carbon footprint. So there's, it really is a total business effort to be able to get to where we all need to go with climate change.
Great.
Yep. And with that, I think we have run out of time for this session. So hope everyone who's attended has enjoyed the conversation, and special thanks to Dave for all your time and your thoughts and insights today. Again, we're going to be putting the recording of this discussion on the Pure Strategies website in the next couple days. And our next webinar is going to be on August 12th. We're going to be discussing science-based targets for nature. So this will be extending beyond climate and looking at topics such as water, biodiversity, land, and oceans. So hopefully you can join us for that. If you want to be informed of future webinars like this, just sign up for our newsletter on our just right off our website, or reach out to Tim or myself. You have our emails on the screen there. And our website has additional resources that might be of use to your work. So feel free to take a look at that. So for now, we will be saying goodbye, and we look forward to connecting with you or having you attend another one of our webinars in the future. Stay well and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.